Good evening. I'm Ian Wardropper, Director of the Frick Collection, and I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's program. We had no doubt that there would be keen interest in these speakers and this topic, and the response tonight proves that correct. I'm very grateful to Stoker Devonshire, Jacob Rothschild, and David Cannadine for joining us. We're most appreciative of the Gagosian Gallery for sponsoring this event. The Center for the History of Collecting was established at the Frick Art Reference Library in 2007, and since its foundation has played an increasingly active role in the study of this fascinating subject. It brings together collectors and scholars in symposia and panels like this one, supports researchers and oral histories, online directories as well as publications, and has recently formed a group of fellows to participate and support its activities. The Center's energetic director, Inga Riest, will introduce this program.
Thank you, Ian. I'd like to add my welcome to all of you. Fortunately, this evening, I'm in the happy position of introducing people who need no introduction. So, Stoker Devonshire, the Duke of Devonshire, Lord Rothschild, Jacob, and Sir David Cannadine. So I felt that this gives me a little opportunity to tell you why they are here and how this event came about. As the director of the Center for the History of Collecting, I marvel at collectors of all categories of art, but particularly collectors who don't become complacent. And certainly, the Duke of Devonshire and Lord Rothschild could become complacent as they care for their legacy collections at Chatsworth and Waddesdon Manor, but they didn't. In fact, it seems that art collecting and art patronage is truly in their DNA, and it is that marriage of the old and the new that brought them here tonight. Over a year ago, actually well over a year ago by now, I was delighted to find myself seated next to the Duke of Devonshire at a lovely dinner at the Yale Center for British Art, and I broached the idea of having a conversation of this kind, saying to him that I would give anything to bring him to the Frick stage to hear him talk about collecting, to which he very calmly responded and said, "You don't have to give anything."
exactly what it is. It's not a house sitting in a garden surrounded by a park. It's a house and a garden and a park designed to be one unified object. It's an exercise in the desire of man to control nature and reinterpret it in an idyllic way. But actually, it's not just whimsy. I know, that of our very nearly 1 million annual visitors we have at Chatsworth, this landscape, these views out from and these views back to the house are the main reason why people come to Chatsworth. Surprising perhaps to you, but I think if you've been to Chatsworth, once you've seen that landscape, you'll understand the magic it holds on all of us. And it is something which we've learnt to take very much more seriously than perhaps used to happen in the olden days, in the 19th century particularly. So we have now decided that we have to preserve it and attempt to return it to what Brown and Kent and Paxton were aiming at over 150 years it took to form. They were all contributed to it. So we have a 20-year park management plan, which will, as it were, remove the graffiti of otherwise unwise additions from the original composition. We'll get it back to what it was. And one early example of this improvement, this is before the chainsaw got to work, and that is after. And that is what Brown and Kent had in mind, the green carpet. And if, ladies and gentlemen, if we can restore this great land art to something of its original design, then I think that Amanda and I might possibly have made some small contribution to our heritage. But of course, we'll be long dead before we have any idea whether people think that's a good idea or not. Thank you very much for so patiently listening. Now we have the main event.
We can't compete, obviously, with Chatsworth. We're 200 years old, as opposed to 600 years or more. And that to do with the collection continues, and therefore we carry it out.
And also, it's great fun putting on exhibitions.
And it's fun, yeah.
It's very hard work. I'm sure that Pippa would say it's very hard, which is very hard work. But once it's there, particularly if it's with artists who cooperate and take part in it and talk to visitors and talk to, it's great. And little education comes from it.
One of the artists who you've both collected and perhaps commissioned is Lucian Freud. Could you talk a little bit more about how you both became interested in him and interested in his work?
Well, you came before me.
Well, he was a friend, as I said, just after the war, he was a friend of my father's two sisters. Then he became a friend of my parents, and he painted them, and he painted my grandmother, painted a little picture of me when I was about 19. And apparently, we've just bought a drawing which apparently is of me. I'm not too sure, but anyway, that's the most recent Freud acquisition we've made. He was sort of around. He was the first visitor to come to stay at Chatsworth when my parents moved in 1959. He partly painted one of his bathroom wall, but then after 6 weeks he had to go and do something else. And he was always part of our lives. He was very good company. And then, of course, he became very famous. And
painted Jacob.
And painted Jacob when he became famous. Yeah.
Actually, it's quite a good story how our relationship started, because I'd met him from time to time, and then one day he rang me up and he said, "Look, I need £1,000 by tonight because I've been gambling. I've lost a lot of money with the Cray brothers. They were the great gangsters of the East End of London. And if I don't pay a deposit of £1,000, I'm going to cut off my right hand." So I said, "Okay, well, I'll do that on two conditions. First, you don't pay back, and second, you never ask me again." And then 30 days later, an envelope came through my letterbox with £1,000, but he never asked me again. And that was how we became friends, really.
And in addition to the paintings of yourself, he's done other paintings of other members of your family, as you showed us there.
Not of my family.
Not of your family.
No, but I mean, I collected his works from 1971 onwards.
What's the difference between collecting works and commissioning works from your perspective?
Well, I think that the major difference with the commissioning work is that you get, at best, what the artist thinks you want. Quite often you get what the artist wants. And it can be disappointing, can be absolutely wonderful, but it is risky. If you see something in a shop or an auction and you buy it, you know what you're getting. But commissioning, whether it's objects, furniture, or paintings, whatever, it is more risky. And I personally believe that risk has to be taken properly, in that the commissioner
What's that? Somebody clapping?
shouldn't influence the artist. I think that if you ask an artist to make something, it's up to the artist.
I feel rather ashamed. I think we've commissioned many works of art. I mean, the nearest I think I can recall at this moment of time of commissioning work of art was these two towers of wine, and that was inspired, if you like, by the idea of seeing them at Versailles, because I was a lucky inheritor of a shareholding in Lafitte, and I thought, well, that's worth celebrating, since the Chinese came on the scene. Lafitte didn't pay a dividend for 150 years and has now become a very profitable business.
Presumably the bottles will be empty when they're on display.
Yeah, they'll have LED lights in them.
Oh, I see.
So yes, they'll be empty, all right, yeah.
I think it's time we asked, that some of you ask some questions. I think there are roving microphones available, so perhaps someone would like to express an interest in asking a question.
That's good. None.
There's someone sitting down here who is kindly volunteering to start us off. Over here. Could you put your hand up again, please, since... over there.
I'm sorry? No, sadly not. There's some very difficult to catch trout. Too difficult for me to catch, but there are those who do, but no salmon in the river.
We have no fish.
Are there any?
I think there are no rules for that, are there? But if you do love paintings, you just want to spend a lot of time in front of them and to learn about them and deepen your knowledge and understanding.
Question over here.
Sheikh Hamad.
This is Jacob. I can't resist. Stoker, I can't resist either. Most of the great collections in the world have been assembled by one eye. And when you see a great collection, you can see the sympathy of one eye and all that was involved in assembling that collection. Could you comment on one eye assembling a collection versus the role of art advisors and having broader groups of people as consultants, and how you think the two can be reconciled?
I mean, I think, John, I mean, you have good exemplars of that in both Chatsworth and at Waddesdon. I mean, the Dukes of Devonshire over 500 years, all of them actually, almost all of them added to the collection with great distinction. If you take my family, they've all in their different ways been rather obsessive collectors, and with a theme which has changed inevitably in the last 50 years or so. So I mean, if you take here, it is largely the creation of one man. And it's a great, great collection. I think, you know, both are entirely possible, don't you?
Mm. So I think that being given advice by somebody who is sympathetic to your taste is always helpful. They can, in my experience, they have put one off making even more stupid mistakes than usual. But I think that in the end it has to come down to oneself, and you just hope.
I think we can probably take two more questions.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, two simple questions, just so we think a bit more. For Stoker, he always likes everything in doubles. Is this the case with the two Egyptian sekhmets that you've got? They are doubles?
The sekhmets were always there, but it is very nice to be regular in that way. I think that it's a
almost the final exhibit was, I think, some furniture from Osborne. Or maybe it was from Balmoral, but it reminded me of Lord Rosebery's celebrated remark that he thought that the furniture in Osborne was the most hideous he'd ever seen, but at that point he hadn't been to Balmoral. And so it's very good to know that improvements in taste are actively afoot. I regret to say that the tyranny of time and the ticking of the clock are inexorable and inevitable, and so much to my regret, I must call these proceedings in a moment to a close. It's been a huge pleasure for me, and I hope for all of you, to have eavesdropped on this conversation between two such distinguished figures and great patrons and collectors, as indeed they both are. And I should have thought that all of us now, when we visit or revisit Chatsworth and revisit Waddesdon, will look at their collections, the historic family collections, and the way they have both embellished and adorned them, both inside the houses and outside, with a much more vivid sense of what has been going on, and a much more vivid sense of the vision, the aesthetic vision, which they themselves have both brought to bear on these very great houses. So not only has this been, I suspect, the most extraordinary event going on even in New York tonight, but for many of us, I think, we have learnt such a large amount that we shall remember it for many months still to come. The least, then, I think, that can be said about tonight is that it more than out-masterpieces masterpiece theatre, and as for Downton Abbey, it is merely dust and detritus beneath their glittering and glowing chariot wheels, and that's progress of a very important kind. More importantly, I would simply want to say that this has been a spectacular evening, as it seems to me. Jacob and Stoker have worked extremely hard. Some of you have also worked quite hard, but now I want you all to work a great deal harder when I simply say to you, ladies and gentlemen, there is only one thing left before we go next door to drink, and that is, in admiration and appreciation of Jacob and Stoker, applause.